what is the scale, like ballpark of amount of vectors when I will be doing I will be looking for nearest neighbor. I will need to support this operation in my system. What is the right scale to start thinking about introducing vector database to my stack? As alternatively, it is something we just discussed with Aurimas, that's you can use traditional database with user-defined function, or there are more and more plugins, extensions that would allow you to that are built in to traditional databases that would allow you to do this type of search. What is the right scale to introduce vector database?
Great question. I would say if you're using anything less than 1 million vectors, I would say just use a vector search library. Now, there's no one right scale to introduce a vector database per se. If you need some of the features that a vector database provides, such as filtered search, scalar search, metadata search, along with your vector search, and I can dive into that a little bit in just a moment here. If you need some of those features, or if you need an extra boost in QPS, you need an extra boost in throughput, you need lower latency, things that a database will be able to provide you that a pure vector search library won't be able to. That's when it's time to use a purpose-built vector database. I would say that the cutoff that I typically see is at about 1 million vectors. At about 1 million vectors, that's when you start getting a little bit more serious about your application. Maybe you start having to include a little bit of bits and pieces of metadata, and that's when you grow from just using a vector search library into using a proper vector database. Now, you were talking about.
I want to stop you here and double check one thing. You already mentioned latency, and it kind of resonated with me that it's quite likely is an important factor, because if were not for latency, maybe I would go with let's Spark and doing it traditional in a batch way, right? But if the latency is a requirement, low latency is a requirement, then.
But I do think that even Redis now supports a interface for ANN search, right? So probably you would not win against Redis, for example. Maybe there are other features that could be, competitive. Like you definitely will not. Would you beat Redis in latency?
Redis actually has really incredible performance, right? And we do beat Redis. We do beat Redis but that's only because we've invested a lot of time into making our vector database very high performance. I don't know how much we beat Redis by. I don't want to sort of give the wrong numbers here, but we do beat Redis. We are faster, we are faster and more performant than Redis. That's not to, that's not to throw slack on Redis. I think the performance that they have is probably better than most of the other purpose-built vector databases out there. And if you look at Redis, I think they've probably been working on this for about 2 years now, to the best of my knowledge. And the reason I think, I'm going to take a step back, and Redis, I think, has done something where they really, really build the vector search they really build vector search functionalities into Redis from the ground up. And they have the capability to build vector search directly into Redis, for lack of a better word. But if you look at, if you look at Elastic, or if you look at Postgres, or, some of these other traditional databases, traditional search engines that now support vector search, it's in some senses, it's done in a bit more of a hacky way. The architecture isn't necessarily there to support vector search from the ground up. And that's where you typically see like a pretty huge drop in performance. And that's when you typically would, while you do get the benefit of, let's say we're using Postgres, right? We're using pgvector. While you do get the benefit of being able to store table-based data, as in a relational database, you also lose performance and you lose not performance in terms of recall necessarily, but you lose performance in terms of latency, in terms of throughput, in terms of QPS, because the Postgres architecture is not built from the ground up to support vectors. It's a little bit different for Redis. Redis, I think, has pretty solid performance. Not the best, as I mentioned, so we are a little bit more performant, but that's not to throw slack on Redis either. I think they've done a pretty tremendous. We've been working on this for close to 5 years at this point, and Redis has only been doing it for 2 or 3. Now they do have more engineering resources, but I think it's one of those things where if your application wants to treat vectors as first-class citizens, I think you should use a purpose-built vector database, right? If your application is built around vectors, and I know we'll probably get to this a little bit later, but a lot of modern LLM, retrieval augmented generation applications, they do have vectors as first-class citizens. Embeddings are first-class citizens in these applications. So I hope that is a bit of a long-winded answer, but I hope that answers your question there.